I want you to just picture something for me really quick.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So put yourself sitting at a table in, one of the most exclusive high-end restaurants in the world.
Oh, nice.
Right. You've got this crisp white tablecloth right in front of you. The lighting is like perfectly dim. The ambiance is super hushed.
Very fancy.
Exactly. And the waiter has just set down a plate that represents essentially the absolute peak of culinary luxury.
Okay, what is it?
It is a massive lobster tail,
Yeah.
or maybe a colossal pile of jumbo lump crab, and it is just completely drenched in hot melted butter.
The dream.
Right. And it costs an absolutely exorbitant amount of money.
Naturally.
So I want you to hold that image of luxury in your mind. Just hold it tight.
Yeah, I got it.
And then I want you to completely flip the camera.
Flip the camera.
Yeah. Plunge all the way down to the pitch black, freezing, high-pressure bottom of the ocean.
Oh, wow. Okay, quite the transition.
Because down there, that exact same symbol of luxury is honestly a heavily armored, frankly alien-looking survival machine.
It really is.
I mean, it's just creeping along the rocks in the dark, right? Using these chemical sensors on its antenna to just feel around the mud for like dead fish, worms, and just detritus to scavenge.
It is a staggering disconnect when you actually put it like that.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, the creatures surviving on the seafloor and the object presented on that white tablecloth, they feel like they belong to completely different dimensions of reality.
And that is exactly why we are doing this custom-tailored deep dive just for you today.
We really are.
We are exploring the incredible, paradoxical, and, sometimes unsettling world of crabs and lobsters.
It gets pretty wild.
It does. Our mission today is to essentially figure out the mechanics of that transition. Like, what actually happens biologically, economically, and ethically when an animal that was engineered over millions of years purely for, armored survival gets transformed into this object of human luxury and status.
And to unpack that whole journey, I mean, we have a massive stack of source materials today.
We really do. What are we looking at?
So we are looking at deep time biological taxonomy, evolutionary studies.
The heavy science stuff.
Right, the heavy science.
Yeah.
But we've also pulled historical catch records that trace back thousands of years.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're digging into modern economic data from the global commercial seafood supply chain. Plus, we are looking at the culinary histories that really, changed how we view these animals in the first place.
It's a lot to cover.
It is.
Yeah.
So to keep us from getting lost in the weeds of the literally thousands of crustacean species out there.
Right, because there are so many.
Exactly. We're going to focus our lens primarily on two iconic anchor species today.
Okay, who are the stars of the show?
The blue crab and the American lobster.
Two absolute heavyweights of the dining table.
Without a doubt.
But, before we even get to the dining table, I actually want to challenge something right out of the gate.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because as I was reading through these biological taxonomy reports you provided,
Yeah.
I realized that the way we talk about these animals, like in everyday life, is basically a giant marketing lie.
Oh, you mean the terminology we use?
Exactly. We call them seafood. You go buy them at the fish market. But scientifically speaking, calling a crab or a lobster a fish is, that's absurd, isn't it?
It is completely biologically inaccurate.
Right.
They do not have a single bone in their entire bodies.
Yeah, one bone.
Not one. They have no internal skeleton. They definitely do not possess scales. And they certainly don't swim using muscular fins like, a salmon or a tuna.
So what are they actually?
They are arthropods.
Arthropods, okay.
Yeah. And to be incredibly specific, they are decapod crustaceans.
Okay, decapod. Let me break that down. Deca meaning 10, so 10 sheet, 10 legs.
10 appendages, yes, exactly.
Okay.
They are invertebrates that are essentially locked inside a hard-jointed external skeleton. And they use specialized gills to extract oxygen from the water.
So they're basically breathing underwater through this armor.
Exactly. And biologically, if you look at their evolutionary tree, you are eating something that is much, much closer to a spider, a millipede, or like a scorpion than you are to a codfish.
Oh, man. So if you are listening to this right now and you're someone who just shudders at the thought of, a large spider in your house.
Yeah, think about that next time you go out to eat.
Right. Just remember that the next time you pay $80 for a lobster dinner, you are essentially eating a giant, heavily armored sea bug.
A very delicious sea bug, but yes.
But a bug, the culinary label seafood just basically lumps everything wet into one giant category, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a completely convenient fiction.
Just marketing.
Exactly. Even the term shellfish, that is a market category. It's not a scientific one at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it lumps for decapod crustaceans in with mollusks.
Like oysters and stuff?
Right. Oysters, clams, squids, which are entirely different branches of the tree of life. They aren't related in any meaningful way.
That's wild. Okay, but let's look at the actual biology of our two anchor species. You mentioned the blue crab first.
Yes. So its scientific name is Calanectes sapidus.
Calanectes sapidus. That sounds very intense.
It does, but it's actually beautiful when you break it down. Calanest comes from Greek and Latin roots, meaning beautiful swimmer.
Okay, beautiful swimmer.
And sapidus means savory.
Okay, hold on. Beautiful, savory swimmer.
Yeah.
Did a chef name this thing, or did a scientist? Because, I mean, that sounds like they were writing a menu, not a taxonomy report.
It totally sounds like a menu item. But the name was actually formalized by Mary Jane Rathbun.
Who was she?
She was a legendary zoologist back in the late 19th and early 20th century.
Oh, wow. Good for her.
Yeah. And the name perfectly captures its dual identity, really.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it is this incredibly agile estuarine predator. It's uniquely adapted to environments like the Chesapeake Bay.
Where the water mixes, right?
Yeah, right. Where fresh river water mixes with the salty ocean. And on the other hand, yes, it happens to taste very, very good to us. Hence, the savory part.
Okay, so that's the beautiful, savory swimmer.
Right.
And on the other side of the ring, we have the American lobster.
Right. Homerus americanus.
Homerus americanus. Got it.
This is your classic cold water, rocky bottom dweller.
The iconic lobster.
Exactly. Their territory stretches all the way from the freezing waters off Labrador, Canada, all the way down through New England.
Okay.
And of course, they're famous for those massive front claws and their incredibly long, muscular tails.
Now, in our sources, there is this whole deep dive into evolutionary time.
Yes, deep time.
Because these two body shapes, you know, the long lobster and the wide flat crab, they didn't just show up yesterday.
No, not at all.
We are talking about lineages that go way, way back before humans were even like a blip on the radar.
We are talking hundreds of millions of years.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah. The broader decapod crustacean lineage has its roots deep in the Paleozoic era.
The Paleozoic. So way back.
Very way back. But if you look at the fundamental architecture, the lobster's body plan is much more ancient.
Really? The lobster is the older model.
Exactly. Long before dinosaurs walked the earth, you had these long-bodied armored creatures just crawling on the ocean floor.
Just doing their thing.
Right. And that long tail of theirs, it's heavily muscled because it's actually an escape mechanism.
Oh, I always wondered about the tail.
Yeah. If a predator approaches, a lobster violently snaps that tail downward and backward.
And that shoots them backwards.
Precisely. It propels them backward through the water, away from the danger.
Okay, so the American lobster essentially looked at that ancient prehistoric blueprint and just said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That is pretty much exactly what happened. They kept that ancestral chassis, so to speak.
Right.
But they highly specialized their front limbs.
Oh, the claws.
Yes. An adult American lobster has this distinct division of labor in its hands.
Wait, they have different types of hands. I thought they were just two claws.
No, they are actually asymmetrical. One claw develops into this massive, blunt crusher.
Okay.
It is heavily calcified, powered by these immense muscles, and it is literally designed to crush the shells of clams and sea urchins.
Like a built-in nutcracker.
Exactly. And then the other claw is smaller, it's quicker, and it's lined with these sharp serrated edges.
And what's that one for?
That's the cutter, or the ripper claw. It's used for tearing flesh.
Wow. So it's basically a built-in multi-tool.
Exactly. A multi-tool attached to an ancient escape pod.
That is wild. But, okay, the crab went down a totally different evolutionary path.
Very different.
And this is the concept from the research that absolutely, completely blew my mind.
Carcinization.
Yes, carcinization. Explain this to me, please.
It's one of my favorite evolutionary quirks. It's basically nature's tendency to evolve a crab.
Because if I am reading these deep time studies correctly,
Yeah.
a crab is essentially just an ancient, long-bodied, lobster-like creature that got, what, tired of getting its tail bitten off?
More or less, yeah.
So it did some kind of evolutionary origami and just folded its entire tail completely under its body. Is that actually what happened?
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it, and yes, mechanically, that is exactly what happened.
That's insane.
Think about it. The long, muscular tail of the lobster is great for swimming away, right?
Yeah, the escape mechanism.
But it's also an incredible liability.
How so?
It is a massive, fleshy target for predators. We're talking marine reptiles, Early sharks, cephalopods.
Right, it's basically a giant snake trailing behind you.
Exactly. Plus, if you have this long tail, it's very hard to back into a tiny shallow crevice in a rock to hide.
Oh, because the tail sticks out, you leave your front door wide open.
Precisely. So, beginning around the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, the evolutionary pressure was just immense.
Right.
Certain lineages of these long-bodied crustaceans began to compress. The abdomen, which is the tail, folded completely under the
It was
thorax.
permanently tucked away.
Permanently. And the carapace, or the top shell, flattened out and grew wider.
Wow.
It essentially became a walking, low-profile tank.
That makes so much sense.
And you want to know the craziest part about carcinization?
What?
It didn't just happen once.
Wait, what do you mean it didn't happen once?
It's called convergent evolution.
Okay.
The crab shape is so incredibly advantageous for surviving on the seafloor that nature has independently evolved it at least 5 separate times
5 different times.
from completely different non-crab ancestors.
You're kidding.
I'm not. A king crab, for instance. It isn't even a true crab biologically.
Wait, a king crab isn't a crab?
Nope. It actually evolved from a hermit crab ancestor that over time eventually gave up its shell, flattened out, and tucked its tail under.
Oh my
It's
God.
basically just mimicking the crab body plan because it works so perfectly.
That is absolutely wild. So the crab shape is basically the ultimate defensive geometry in the ocean.
It really is.
So the crab turns its whole body into this compressed shield. And the lobster keeps the tail, but turns its front hands into a crusher-cutter combo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
2 different solutions to the same problem.
But, okay, here is the elephant in the room regarding their biology.
Okay, let's hear it.
Both of these survival strategies rely on an exoskeleton, right?
Correct.
It's a rigid box made of chitin and calcium carbonate.
Yes.
And that creates a massive, massive biological crisis when it comes time to grow.
Oh, it is the ultimate paradox of their entire existence.
Right.
Because the very armor that keeps them alive is the exact same thing that regularly tries to kill them.
Yes. We are talking about ecosis.
Decapod, the molting process.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of this because honestly, it's horrifying.
It is a bit like body horror, yeah.
If you are a listener out there with kids, right? Imagine if your teenager couldn't just grow taller gradually.
Oh, boy.
Imagine if once a year their skeleton was on the outside of their body made of stone and they had to literally burst out of it just to grow an inch.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie.
It really does. So how does a crab or a lobster actually achieve this without just dying on the spot?
Well, the biochemistry behind it is fascinating, but it is exhausting for the animal.
Okay, walk me through it.
So, when a crustacean reaches the physical limits of its current shell, when it literally can't fit anymore, its brain triggers a process. Specifically, there's this thing called the X organ, located in its eye stalks.
Wait, in its eyes?
Yes, in the eye stalks. It stops producing a molt-inhibiting hormone. And once that drops, it triggers a massive flood of ecdysone, which is the molting hormone.
So it's literally a chemical switch that flips inside their eyes.
That's exactly what it is. And once that switch flips, the animal begins to actually reabsorb the calcium from its old shell right into its bloodstream.
To weaken the armor.
Exactly. It weakens the old shell while simultaneously secreting a totally new, soft, wrinkled shell underneath the hard one.
Oh, wow. So they have 2 shells for a minute.
Right. And then, when the time finally comes, the animal drinks in a massive, massive amount of seawater.
Okay, why?
It swells its internal tissues until the pressure literally cracks the old shell open.
Just from the water pressure inside them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually it cracks right at the seam where the carapace meets the tail.
Okay, so it pops open.
And then what? They just walk out.
Oh, I wish it were that easy for them. No, they have to painstakingly pull their entire body backward out of the old shell.
Backward.
Yes. And I'm not just talking about the main body chunk. They have to pull out every single jointed leg, their delicate antenna, the translucent coverings over their own eyes.
They pull their eyes out of the eye holes.
Yes. And this is the craziest part. They even have to pull out the chitinous lining of their own gills and their own stomach.
Wait, stop. They pull the lining out of their own stomach.
They literally pull it out through their mouth.
That sounds less like biological growth and more like a medieval torture device.
It is incredibly traumatic. It takes immense energy. And honestly, if a crab or lobster gets stuck halfway, which definitely happens, it will die.
It just dies stuck in its own shell.
Yes. But let's say it successfully pulls free, right?
Okay, it makes it out.
For the next several hours, maybe even days, it is completely soft.
Like how
Yeah.
soft? It has the consistency of a wet paper bag.
A wet paper bag.
Yeah. It cannot walk properly. It cannot defend itself at all. Its claws are completely useless.
Okay, so this highly engineered armored tank suddenly becomes the single most vulnerable creature in the entire ocean.
Exactly.
How on earth is this a viable evolutionary design? I mean, forcing yourself to become totally defenseless just to grow seems like a terrible gamble.
It is a massive gamble, but you have to view it as a calculated one. It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
They accept this brief window of absolute life-threatening vulnerability, right?
Uh-huh.
But in exchange, they get months or even years of near invincibility once they harden.
I see.
During this soft phase, they have to hide deep in crevices or they bury themselves completely in the mud, and they just keep pumping their bodies full of water.
To stretch the new shell.
Exactly, to stretch the new soft shell to a larger size before it begins to calcify and harden using all those minerals from the seawater.
Okay. But the incredible thing from the research, and I love this part, is that this terrifying vulnerability is also kind of their reset button.
Oh, the regeneration. Yes.
Right, because if they lost a claw in a fight with a predator, they can actually regrow it during this molt, can't they?
They absolutely can. Inside the old shell, before they molt, a small bud of a new limb starts growing. Just fold it up tightly.
Okay.
When they molt and crack open, that new limb inflates. Now, it might be smaller than the original claw at first,
Sure.
but over a few successive molts, they will have a completely, fully functional weapon again.
That is just incredible. Now, the sources show that the blue crab and the American lobster handle this massive risk in completely different ways, right, based on where they live.
Right, they have wildly different life strategies.
Tell me about that.
So biologists refer to this as the difference between rise selection and K-selection strategies.
Okay, layman's terms, please.
Basically, the blue crab is the estuarine opportunist. It plays a fast, furious numbers game.
Quantity over quality.
Exactly. An adult female blue crab will carry this massive egg mass on her abdomen, which we call a sponge.
A sponge.
And that sponge can contain upwards of 2 to 3 million eggs.
Millions for a single crab.
Millions.
Yeah.
Because they live in these estuaries that are absolutely full of fish, birds, and other crabs, they know on a biological level that almost all of their offspring are going to be eaten.
Right. It's just an all-you-can-eat buffet for everyone else.
It really is.
Yeah.
So they release these larvae as microscopic plankton called zoea, which just drift on the currents. The mortality rate is staggering.
I can imagine.
But the tiny, tiny fraction that actually survive, they grow incredibly fast. A blue crab can reach maturity and adult size in just 12 to 18 months.
That's so fast.
Yeah, and their total lifespan in the wild is usually only 3 to 4 years. It's a strategy built entirely on sheer volume and speed.
So they live fast, die young, and leave a million microscopic babies.
Exactly.
And what about the lobster?
The American lobster is the complete opposite. It relies on patience, cold water, and very heavy armor.
Okay, the K-selection strategy.
Right. A female lobster carries her eggs under her tail for up to 11 months before they even hatch.
Almost a year.
Yeah. And the larvae also drift in the plankton and face massive mortality, just like the crabs. But once a baby lobster survives long enough to actually settle onto the rocky seafloor and find a crevice, it is playing the long game.
Because it's cold down there.
Exactly. Because the water is so cold, their metabolism is much slower. A lobster might have to undergo that terrifying molting process we just talked about.
The stomach-pulling nightmare.
Right. They might have to do that 25 times in their first 5 to 7 years just to reach a 1-pound size.
Wait. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
If you are at a restaurant and you order a 1-pound lobster,
Just a standard lobster dinner.
that animal had to survive 25 near-death experiences, pulling its stomach lining out of its own mouth and hiding as a soft, helpless paper bag 25 separate times just to become big enough to be legally caught.
That is exactly right.
That is, I mean, I almost feel bad eating them now.
It takes immense resilience. And once they hit adulthood, that molting process slows way down. Maybe they do it once a year or once every few years for the really massive
And
individuals.
for how long can they live?
They can live for 50 years, maybe even longer in the right conditions. They're highly territorial, very solitary creatures, just slowly building their fortresses in the dark.
Wow. Okay, so for millions of years, this dynamic works perfectly.
It's a perfect equilibrium.
Right. The crabs flood the estuaries with millions of babies. The lobsters slowly build their rocky fortresses in the cold depths. And the only real threats to them are, sharks, big fish, and the occasional bad molt.
Right, natural threats.
But then a new predator shows up on the shoreline.
Us.
Yes, humans. A predator that doesn't just have sharp teeth, but one that can actually observe behavior, build tools, and eventually construct a massive global supply chain.
The arrival of human harvesting really changed everything, and the relationship between humans and crustaceans, I mean, it goes back to the very dawn of our species.
Right, because you don't need a boat to catch a crab. You don't need to be some master mariner.
No, you definitely don't. You just need a low tide and a pair of hands.
Exactly.
Our sources point to some incredible archaeological evidence, like there are these shell middens.
What's a shell midden?
Basically, they are ancient, compacted trash heaps of discarded shells.
Oh, like prehistoric garbage dumps.
Exactly. And they found these in places like Saldanha Bay in South Africa.
How old are they?
They date back 60,000 to 70,000 years.
Wow.
Yeah, for early humans, the intertidal zone was just this incredible buffet. Crabs and lobsters were a super reliable, high-protein food source that required very low technological investment.
That makes sense. And if we look specifically at the North American coastline, long before European colonization, indigenous peoples were just absolute masters of this harvest, right?
Absolutely. The Wabanaki Nations up in the north, covering modern-day Maine and the Maritimes, they heavily utilized lobsters.
And down south.
Down in the Chesapeake Bay, indigenous tribes thrived on the sheer abundance of the blue crab.
But they weren't wiping them out, right?
Oh, no, not at all. It was a seasonal harvest. They used spears, baited hand lines, simple dip nets. They deeply understood the seasonal movements, the molting cycles.
Right.
It was subsistence gathering that was deeply tied to the natural rhythms of the local ecosystem.
But subsistence gathering is fundamentally different from commercial extraction.
Very different.
Because what the historical records outline is this gradual but intense escalation of technology. And it's not just about, building a bigger boat. It's about weaponizing the animal's own behavior against it.
That is the turning point right there. Think about how a trap actually works.
Okay.
Before the trap was invented, human effort was required for every single catch. You had to physically stand in the water with a spear or a net.
You had to be present.
Right. But when humans invented the wooden lath trap, which is essentially just a wooden crate with a funnel-shaped net entrance, we changed the entire math of the ocean.
How so? Like, what does the trap really do?
Well, functionally, a trap allows you to catch while you sleep. You drop it and leave.
Yeah.
But more insidiously, it exploits the very evolutionary adaptations that kept the animal alive for millions of years.
Wait, explain that.
Why does a lobster go into a trap?
I mean, I assume it smells the bait, right? The rotting fish.
Yes, it smells the bait. But it also goes in because the physical shape of the trap represents a dark, tight, secure crevice.
Oh, wow.
The exact instinct that evolved to protect them from a shark, that urge to back into a dark hole, is exactly what we use to lock them in a box.
That is a remarkably dark irony. They're literally seeking safety, and they walk right into a kitchen.
Exactly.
And over time, those wooden crafts just become wire pots, right? Because wire is more durable.
Right.
Rowboats become motorized vessels. We start using hydraulic haulers powered by the boat's engine.
Which is huge, because it means a single fisher can haul hundreds of heavy, waterlogged traps a day instead of doing it by hand.
And today, I read they use sonar and GPS chart plotters.
Oh, yeah. They don't just drop traps blindly anymore.
Oh.
They map the seafloor in high definition to find the exact rocky ledges where they know lobsters congregate.
It's militarized fishing. But, the real game changer, the thing that took these animals from a local coastal meal to a massive global commodity, it wasn't the boat or the trap.
No, it wasn't.
It was the train and the ice block.
Yes. The Industrial Revolution of refrigeration. This is absolutely critical.
Well, why is it so critical?
Because crustaceans are highly perishable. For almost all of human history, a lobster or a crab was geographically tethered to the coast.
If you moved it, it went bad.
Exactly. You could not eat one in a city 500 miles inland without, dying of severe food poisoning.
Right.
But in the 19th century, with the rapid expansion of railroads and this massive commercial ice harvesting industry in New England, humans essentially figured out how to build an artificial ocean on wheels.
An artificial ocean on wheels. So we essentially decoupled the animal from its ecosystem.
We did.
If you are sitting in a dining room in Chicago in, say, 1890, you no longer need to know anything about the tides of the Chesapeake Bay or the rocky shoals of Maine to eat this animal. You just need money.
Precisely.
Oh.
We reduced the human uncertainty of the food supply But in doing so, we unleashed immense ecological pressure.
Right, because demand goes through the roof.
The ocean shifted from being this local environment that you had to deeply understand in order to survive into this vast, invisible supply zone that you could just extract from at a massive scale.
Okay, let's follow that logic for a second. Because whenever human demand for a biological resource skyrockets, whether we're talking about wheat, corn, cows, or chickens, we do the exact same thing every time.
We farm it.
Exactly. We stop hunting it and we start farming it. We domesticate it. So if the global demand for crab and lobster is astronomical and dragging them out of the ocean with boats and traps is so unpredictable and expensive, why on earth haven't we just built massive lobster farms?
Right.
I mean, we farm salmon, we farm shrimp in these massive ponds. Why not lobsters?
This is what our sources refer to as the aquaculture illusion.
The illusion. Okay, why is it an illusion?
The simple answer is that farming plants is about managing biology,
Right.
You control the light, the soil, the nutrients.
Yeah.
But farming animals is about managing behavior. And decapods have horrific behavior for captivity.
You're saying they're bad roommates.
I am saying they're psychopathic roommates.
Oh, wow.
To understand why we can't farm them, you really have to look at the immense biological roadblocks. First, as we mentioned earlier, the larval stages are incredibly complex.
The microscopic drifting stage.
Right. They require pristine, microscopic planktonic food and highly specific water flow, which is very, very expensive to replicate in a hatchery environment.
But okay, let's play devil's advocate. Let's say some Silicon Valley startup figures out the larval stage with, high-tech water filtration. Then what?
Then you run straight into the growth rate.
Oh.
Think about it. A farmed salmon reaches market size in about 2 to 3 years. An American lobster takes 5 to 7 years to reach 1 pound. As an aquaculture farmer, you have to house, heat, and feed a high-protein diet to an animal for 7 entire years before you see a single dollar of return on investment. Yeah. Economically, it's a total nightmare.
That is a terrible business model. But even if you have, unlimited funding, there's still the cannibalism issue, right?
That is the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
Lobsters and crabs are violently territorial and opportunistic.
Yeah.
If you put 500 lobsters in a massive tank, they won't just swim around happily together like a school of salmon.
No.
No, they will fight for dominance constantly. And more importantly, the moment one of them molts, the moment it sheds its hard shell and becomes that soft, helpless blob of meat we talked about. Every other lobster in that tank isn't going to see a neighbor. They're going to see a free, high-protein lunch.
So it's basically a high-density apartment complex where the tenants actively try to eat each other every single time someone changes their clothes.
That is exactly what it is. It's absurd. The only way to farm them is to house every single lobster in solitary confinement.
Are you serious?
Yes. A separate physical compartment for every single animal. You have to feed them individually, clean their individual compartments, and monitor their water quality for 7 years. It scales terribly.
Okay, but what about crabs? Because I hear about soft-shell crab farms all the time, especially around Maryland and the Chesapeake. Is that just a lie?
It's a massive misunderstanding of terms. It is not true aquaculture.
Really?
Really. They aren't breeding crabs from eggs in a lab. What the industry calls soft-shell farming is actually just captive holding of wild catch.
Wait, explain how that works.
So watermen go out and catch what they call peeler crabs. These are wild crabs that exhibit visual signs on their swimmerette fins that indicate they're about to molt within just a few days.
Okay, so they pull them from the ocean right at the finish line.
Yes. They put these wild-caught peelers into shallow, controlled shedding tanks on land, and then it requires constant human surveillance. Because the moment a crab molts and drops its hard shell, a literal clock starts ticking. The waterman has to pull the soft crab out of the water immediately before the new shell can absorb calcium and harden.
Oh, because if it hardens, it's not a soft shell crab anymore.
Exactly. Once it's out of the water, the hardening process stops, and the crab is packed and shipped to a restaurant. So it is highly controlled finishing. It is definitely not full-cycle farming.
That is an incredible realization. It means that despite all of our technological supremacy, right? Despite iPhones and space travel, our entire global supply of crab and lobster, every single crab cake on a menu, every live tank in a luxury restaurant, it relies almost entirely on people hunting wild scavengers on the open ocean.
Almost 100%. It is truly one of the last true wild commercial hunts on Earth.
Wow.
And because we are hunting a wild, highly perishable animal, it creates immense logistical friction. We literally have to rip them from the seafloor and race against the clock to get them to a plate before they rot.
Which brings us perfectly to what the sources call the culinary paradox.
Yes, the paradox.
Because the biology of these animals forces us to treat them in bizarre ways in the kitchen. Let's talk about that spoilage clock. Why does a dead crab or lobster go bad so much faster than, say, a dead chicken or a potato?
It completely comes down to their biochemistry. Remember, they are marine scavengers. Their bodies are moist, incredibly protein-rich, and loaded with very active enzymes in a specialized organ called the hepatopancreas.
Okay, the hepatopancreas. Is that what chefs call the tomole?
Yes, exactly, the green stuff. When the animal dies, its immune system shuts down immediately, and those powerful digestive enzymes essentially turn inward. They start to break down the animal's own flesh almost instantly.
They literally digest themselves from the inside out.
They do. And furthermore, marine organisms utilize chemical compounds to balance the salt in their bodies against the ocean water.
Right.
One of these compounds is trimethylene oxide, or TMAO.
TMAO, got it.
The moment the animal dies, naturally occurring bacteria begin breaking that TMAO down into trimethylamine, or TMA.
And what does TMA do?
TMA is the chemical responsible for that sharp, pungent, overwhelming fishy or ammonia smell.
Ah, the bad seafood smell.
Exactly. If a crab smells like ammonia, it is already decaying rapidly.
Right.
The flesh just turns to absolute mush.
Which perfectly explains why the live holding tank was invented.
Yes, the tank.
When I walk into a seafood restaurant and see a glass tank full of lobsters just like crawling over each other with banded claws, I always used to think it was just a marketing gimmick to show me what I was eating. But it's actually a life support system.
It is the ultimate preservation method. You can't pause the enzymes or the bacteria if the animal is dead, so you have to keep the animal alive until the absolute last possible second before you cook it.
Wow.
A restaurant tank isn't just a fishbowl. It is a highly engineered micro-ocean.
What goes into it?
It requires chillers to keep the water cold to slow their metabolism, biofilters to process the toxic ammonia from their waste, and protein skimmers to keep the water oxygenated. All of this expensive infrastructure exists just to hold off decay.
That's crazy. And because of this race against time, and because they are physically difficult to eat due to their shells, human history has essentially fractured the culinary identities of crab and lobster into two entirely different directions.
Completely different.
In the research, crab is described as communal and regional, while lobster is ceremonial and luxurious. Let's unpack the crab first.
Sure. Think about the physical act of eating a crab. You cannot do it with a knife and fork while wearing a tuxedo.
Definitely not.
A traditional Maryland blue crab feast involves covering a long picnic table in old newspaper. You just dump a massive pile of steamed crabs, heavily coated in a spice blend like Old Bay, right in the center of the table.
And then you basically go to war.
You do. You have wooden mallets, tiny picking knives, and your bare hands. It is inherently messy. It takes a lot of time. You have to break the claws, dig through the labyrinth of the internal cartilage in the body, and extract these tiny morsels of meat.
You really have to work for it.
It forces the diner to slow down.
But that's kind of the beautiful part of it, isn't it? Because it's so labor-intensive, it forces conversation. It becomes a social ritual.
Exactly. It's a ritual of belonging. It grounds you in a specific place.
Yeah.
And even when that crab meat is processed into a dish, like a Maryland crab cake or a Singapore chili crab, it retains that cultural weight.
How so?
Well, a crab cake is literally taking all that painstaking human labor of picking out the meat and compacting it into a fragile, pan-fried object of regional pride.
It makes sense. And Singapore chili crab.
Singapore chili crab is this massive mud crab smothered in a thick, sweet, spicy tomato chili sauce. You literally have to eat it with your hands, soak up the sauce with steamed buns, and you get it all over your face and fingers. Crab just demands your physical engagement.
It's earthy. It's working class food at its core, but then you pivot to lobster. And lobster is the complete antithesis.
The absolute opposite.
Lobster is the crisp white tablecloth. It is the silver platter.
Lobster is theatrical. It is dishes like lobster thermidor.
What's thermidor?
It's where the meat is extracted, cooked with a rich cream sauce, egg yolks, cognac, and mustard, and then stuffed elegantly back into its own shell and broiled with cheese.
Oh my God.
Right. Or it's lobster bisque, which is this complex, labor-intensive French soup that extracts deep roasted flavor from the shells themselves by pulverizing them and simmering them with aromatics.
Even the more casual Maine lobster roll treats the meat like a precious jewel, right? Just gently coated in butter or mayo and laid into a toasted bun. Lobster is a performance of wealth.
It really is.
But this is where I want to stop and look at the history because I am fascinated by this PR pivot.
The rebranding.
Yes, the sources explicitly state that this idea of lobster as an ancient inherent luxury is a complete myth. In fact, it was prison food.
It was.
How on earth does an animal go from being a punishment ration to a Wall Street status symbol?
It is arguably the greatest rebranding campaign in culinary history. If you go back to colonial North America, particularly in 17th and 18th century New England, lobsters were so incredibly abundant that after a strong storm, they would wash ashore in piles 2 feet deep on the beaches.
2 feet deep.
Yes,
You could just walk down with a wheelbarrow and scoop them up.
exactly.
Yeah.
And because of basic human psychology, if something is everywhere and requires zero effort or money to acquire, we assign it zero status.
So is trash food?
Lobsters were considered trash food. They were literally used as fertilizer for farm fields.
No way.
Yes, and they were fed to pigs. And yes, they were fed to prisoners, apprentices, and indentured servants. There are actual historical accounts of servants staging strikes and putting clauses in their contracts that they could not be forced to eat lobster more than 3 times a week.
That is hilarious. Please, no more lobster, I'm begging you.
Right.
So what triggered the flip? If they were trash food, how did they become luxury?
2 things. Scarcity and transportation.
Beep.
As the coastal cities grew, the massive inshore populations of lobsters began to thin out from overharvesting. You couldn't just pick them up on the beach anymore. You had to build boats and traps.
Which required labor, which raised the price.
Right. But the real shift was the railroad and the tourism industry in the late 1800s.
The artificial ocean on wheels we talked about.
Exactly. Wealthy urbanites from New York, Philadelphia, and Boston started traveling to the coast of Maine for summer vacations to escape the heat and the smog of the city.
Okay, I see where this is going.
While they were there, they ate the local cheap lobster. They associated the taste of that animal with their romantic, breezy coastal holiday. When they took the train back to the industrial smog of the city, they demanded lobster.
Ah, so it became a symbol that you had the money and the leisure time to actually vacation in Maine.
Yes. And as the canning industry and later live rail transport made it possible to ship lobster inland, high-end restaurants in New York realized they could charge a huge premium for this exotic coastal novelty.
And there's a specific story in the research about this, right? Delmonico's.
Yes. The famous story from Delmonico's in New York in the 1870s. A sea captain named Ben Winberg showed the chefs a rich, cream and sherry-based lobster dish he had discovered.
Okay.
Delmonico's put it on the menu as Lobster Winberg. But when the captain later got into a huge fight with the owner, they simply reversed the letters and renamed it Lobster Newburg.
That's incredibly petty. I love it.
It was. But it became an absolute sensation among the elite.
That is incredible. They didn't change the animal at all. They just changed the context, reduced the supply, and wrapped it in exclusivity. They completely manufactured luxury.
Delicacy is rarely just about taste. It is mostly about logistics and class.
Right.
The live tank in the restaurant. It wasn't just to prove the animal was fresh, it was a visual flex.
A flex. How
Yeah.
so?
It demonstrated that the restaurant, and by extension, the diner who could afford to eat there, possessed the vast capital required to pull a cold water scavenger from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and keep it alive in a glass box in the middle of a desert city like Las Vegas.
Wow.
You aren't just paying for the meat, you are paying to consume a logistical miracle.
And as we manufactured that luxury, we also completely mutated the health profile of the animal.
Oh, severely.
Because biologically, if you just boil a lobster or steam a crab, they are incredibly healthy.
Highly nutritious. They are lean proteins, virtually devoid of fat, and packed with critical micronutrients like vitamin B12, copper, selenium, and zinc.
But no one eats plain boiled lobster.
No, absolutely not. We take this prehistoric mineral-rich survival machine and we drown it in saturated fat.
The hot butter.
We submerge the lobster in clarified butter. We take the delicate sweet crab meat, bind it with heavy mayonnaise, coat it in breadcrumbs, and deep fry it. We literally turn a lean protein into a massive calorie and cholesterol bomb.
And it's not just the butter we have to worry about, is it? The sources also highlight the very real dangers of consuming these wild animals.
Yes.
Because we are eating a filter-feeding marine scavenger, we are exposing ourselves to their environment.
This is a crucial point that a lot of people forget. We treat them like manufactured products. but they are wild organisms.
Right.
Because they scavenge and filter water in coastal zones, they can harbor naturally occurring marine pathogens, like Vibrio bacteria.
Vibrio, what does that do?
If the seafood is undercooked or cross-contaminates other food, Vibrio can cause severe, life-threatening gastrointestinal illness and even blood infections.
That's terrifying. Not to mention the toxins from red tides, right?
Exactly. Harmful algal blooms produce neurotoxins that the shellfish can accumulate right in their bodies.
Yeah.
If a human eats a contaminated crab, it can lead to paralytic shellfish poisoning, which, by the way, cannot be cooked out.
You can't just boil it away.
No, the toxin survives the heat, and of course the most common danger of all, allergies.
Right. Shellfish allergies are incredibly common.
Crustaceans are among the top food allergens globally. The protein tropomyosin in their muscles triggers a massive immune response in sensitive individuals.
So for most people, a crab leg is a delicacy. But for someone with an allergy, the exact same crab leg is a lethal trigger for anaphylaxis.
It is a stark reminder that this is a biologically complex, potent, wild protein.
Which brings us perfectly into the dark side of this global appetite.
The economics.
Right. We've talked about the biology, the history, and the culinary rebranding. But this massive, relentless demand for a luxury wild animal has birthed a staggering economic engine.
It really has.
When a wild animal becomes a global commodity, there's a lot of money changing hands. So let's map this out. Who is actually making the money here, and whose labor is being intentionally hidden from the consumer?
Well, the scale of the money is immense. In the United States alone, the American lobster and the various crab fisheries are absolute financial juggernauts.
How big are we talking?
According to recent data and the sources, both U.S. lobsters and crabs consistently generate over $500 million annually.
$500 million.
And that is just the landings value.
What does that mean?
That is the price paid directly to the fishers at the dock when they unload the boat. The total economic impact, once you factor in processing, shipping, and retail markup, is in the multi-billions.
Okay, let's trace that money. Let's map the supply chain. If I am sitting in a restaurant in Paris or a high-end banquet hall in Shanghai, and I order a live American lobster, how did it actually get there? What is the chain of custody?
Okay, it starts on the water. Step one is the fisher, usually operating a small, independent, family-owned boat. They're out on the ocean in freezing, incredibly dangerous conditions, hauling heavy wire traps.
Right, the dangerous part.
They bring their catch back to the harbor and sell it to a dock dealer or a local cooperative.
So the fisher gets their check based on whatever the dock price is that day. Then what happens?
From the dock dealer, the live lobsters are often transported to a pound.
Like a dog pound?
Kind of, but for lobsters. These are massive coastal holding facilities that pump millions of gallons of ocean water through vast tank systems.
Okay. Some of these pounds can hold hundreds of thousands, even millions of pounds of live lobster. They are essentially parking lots for live animals.
Why do they hold them?
The distributors hold them there waiting for market prices to peak. For instance, hoarding inventory in the fall to sell at a massive premium during the winter holidays or Lunar New Year.
They are literally playing the lobster stock market.
Exactly. And when it's finally time to sell, the lobsters are graded by size and shell hardness.
Right.
They are packed into styrofoam coolers lined with wet newspaper or seaweed, along with gel ice packs. Then they are put on trucks or loaded onto international air freight. They literally fly globally in the cargo holds of commercial jets.
So these lobsters are flying first class to Europe and Asia.
Basically, yes. They land, clear customs, and are purchased by a regional distributor who then sells them to a luxury restaurant. The chef cooks it, plates it, and the waiter serves it to you.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because when I go to that restaurant, I always see those terrifying words on the menu. Market price.
Ah, yes. Market price. Now I understand why it fluctuates. But whose risk am I actually paying for? When I pay $75 for that lobster, is the money going to the fisher who risked their life in freezing water to pull the trap? Or is it just the restaurant marking it up because they put a white tablecloth over the table?
You are paying for the entire infrastructure, but the profit distribution is wildly uneven.
Really?
Yes. The fisher who took the physical risk to extract the animal from the sea gets only a tiny fraction of the final retail value.
That doesn't seem fair.
The massive markups happen in the middle of the chain. The air freight logistics, the distributors holding inventory, and, of course, the restaurant.
So the market price is mostly shipping costs.
That market price is not just the price of the meat. It is the cost of jet fuel. It is the cost of the electricity running the protein skimmers in the live tanks. It prices in the mortality rate the percentage of lobsters that inevitably die in transit. You are paying a premium for the illusion that the ocean is right outside the restaurant door, even if you are in a landlocked country.
That makes perfect sense for the live lobster market. But what about the crab industry?
That's a different story entirely.
Yeah, because I rarely see live blue crabs on an airplane. The crab supply chain I interact with usually ends with me buying a pristine little plastic tub of pasteurized jumbo lump crab meat at the grocery store.
And that tub of crab meat introduces a completely different and deeply hidden economic reality.
What do you mean?
The live lobster trade relies on logistics. The crab meat trade relies on invisible labor.
Because someone has to actually get the meat out of the shell.
Exactly. And unlike a fish, which you can easily run through a filleting machine in a factory.
Right, machines can't pick crabs.
No, they can't. A crab's internal anatomy is a complex, calcified labyrinth of cartilage. You cannot easily automate the extraction of crab meat without completely destroying the valuable large lumps of muscle.
So how do they do it?
It requires highly skilled, repetitive, painstaking manual labor. Someone has to physically sit at a stainless steel table with a small knife and pick the meat out, piece by piece, by hand.
So every time I eat a crab cake, human hands have touched almost every single flake of that meat.
Yes.
Who is doing that work?
Historically and currently, that grueling work is done by marginalized groups. In places like the Chesapeake Bay, the crab-picking houses were historically staffed by local women.
And today?
Today, the industry relies incredibly heavily on seasonal migrant labor, often women arriving on H-2B temporary work visas from Latin America.
Oh, wow.
They are paid based on the weight of the meat they pick.
So they're working at breakneck speed just to make a wage?
Yes, exactly. It is physically taxing work that causes severe arthritis and repetitive strain injuries.
That's awful.
The entire prestige of a product like jumbo lump Maryland blue crab, which can sell for $40 a pound or more, depends entirely on human labor that is intentionally kept out of sight and often compensated at rates that pale in comparison to the retail markup. It's the invisible hands behind the local luxury.
And because it's processed, because it's just a tub of white meat when I buy it, it seems like it would be incredibly easy to lie about what's actually in the tub.
Which brings us to the rampant issue of seafood fraud.
Fraud.
Oh yeah. When you buy a whole crab, you know what species it is just by looking at the shell. But once the meat is picked and pasteurized, it just looks like white protein.
Right, it's just meat.
Our sources point to massive investigations by conservation groups like Oceana. They use DNA testing on seafood sold in restaurants and grocery stores.
What did they find?
They found that in a shocking number of cases, restaurants advertising local Maryland crab cakes were serving cakes that contained absolutely zero local blue crab.
Zero. What was in it then?
The meat was from much cheaper species, like the Asian swimming crab, which had been caught, processed, frozen, and shipped halfway across the world.
That is infuriating. You go to a restaurant on the waterfront, you pay a massive premium because you want to support the romance of the local Chesapeake watermen, and you're actually eating an imported, mass-produced commodity from an entirely different ocean.
Exactly. Processing hides the identity of the animal, it hides the geography of the catch, and it hides the labor. It turns a wild creature into an interchangeable widget.
This relentless drive to commodify these animals, to maximize profit, and to supply this global luxury market, it inevitably collides with the reality of the physical world, doesn't it?
It does. These are not infinite resources.
Right. They live in fragile marine ecosystems that are absolutely buckling under the pressure. The environmental crises outlined in our sources are deeply, deeply alarming. Let's start with the American lobster. What is happening in the cold waters of the Atlantic?
The lobster is facing a profound, slow-motion climate crisis.
Because of the temperature?
Yes. The American lobster, as we discussed, requires cold water to thrive and successfully reproduce. But the ocean is warming. And specifically, the Gulf of Maine, which is the heart of the U.S. lobster fishery, is warming faster than almost any other body of water on the entire planet.
Oh, wow. Why is that?
Largely due to shifts in the Gulf Stream and broader global climate change.
So if the water gets too warm for them, what do? Do they just die off?
No, they migrate. The population is literally fleeing the heat. They are moving steadily northward toward the colder waters of Canada, and they are moving further offshore into deeper, colder channels.
What does that mean for the fishers who rely on them?
It's an economic slow squeeze. Maine's lobster catches hit staggering historic peak volumes around 2016.
Okay.
But since then, the numbers have been trending downward. The fishers have to travel further from shore, burn more diesel fuel, buy bigger boats, and take larger physical risks in deep water just to chase the migrating lobsters.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. The fishery isn't collapsing overnight, but the geography of the industry is fundamentally shifting right under their feet.
But the warming water isn't even the most controversial environmental issue surrounding the lobster industry right now, is it?
No.
The real flashpoint is the whales.
Yes. The North Atlantic right whale.
Tell me about that.
It is one of the most critically endangered marine mammals on Earth. There are only a few hundred left in existence.
Just a few hundred.
That's it. And the conflict arises from the gear used to catch lobsters. The lobster traps sit on the seafloor, but they have to be hauled upright.
Right.
So they are connected to floating buoys on the surface by long, heavy vertical ropes.
And the whales swim through those ropes.
Exactly. As the whales migrate through these fishing grounds, they cannot see the ropes. They swim into them, panic, and roll, becoming horribly entangled.
Oh, that's terrible.
It is. The heavy ropes can cut into their flesh, cause amputations, or just drag them down, leading to exhaustion, starvation, or drowning.
Which led to a massive public battle. I remember seeing headlines where conservation groups were telling people to boycott lobster entirely.
Yes. Organizations like Seafood Watch recently downgraded the American lobster fishery to a red rating, effectively telling consumers to avoid buying it altogether.
How did the fishers react?
It caused an absolute uproar among the fishing communities, who argue they are doing everything they can to modify their gear and avoid the whales.
This is such a profound ethical knot.
It really is.
Because if you just look at the lobster population, the fishery might be considered completely sustainable, right? They throw back the females, they respect size limits, the lobster numbers are relatively stable.
Right, on paper it's sustainable.
Yet the method of catching them could be pushing an entirely different species, an endangered whale, to extinction.
It forces us to ask what the word sustainable actually means.
Exactly.
Is sustainability just about managing the target species like inventory in a warehouse, or does it require holistic accountability for the entire ecosystem?
And the blue crab has its own entirely different ecosystem crisis, doesn't it?
It does.
Because they live in estuaries right up against the coastline. They don't have the luxury of migrating to deep ocean water. They are trapped right next to our cities.
Precisely. Estuarine degradation is the primary threat to the blue crab.
Runoff.
Yes. Estuaries are the drainage basins for the land. When we use massive amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers on farms and suburban lawns, that runoff washes into the rivers and down into bays like the Chesapeake.
Which causes the dead zones.
Yes. The nutrients cause explosive algae blooms. When the algae dies and sinks, bacteria consume it, sucking all the dissolved oxygen out of the water.
Leaving nothing for the crabs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This creates massive hypoxic zones, dead zones. If a crab cannot escape a dead zone, it literally suffocates.
That's bleak.
Furthermore, coastal development and pollution are destroying the underwater seagrass beds.
And why do they need the seagrass?
Yeah, remember the molting process.
Oh, right. When they become the soft, wet paper bag.
Right. When a crab molts and becomes soft and defenseless, it desperately needs a complex environment to hide in. Seagrass beds are their nurseries and their hiding spots. Without seagrass, the soft crabs are completely exposed to predators.
So they just get eaten.
This habitat loss is catastrophic. In recent years, the Chesapeake blue crab population plummeted. In 2025, estimates put the population at around 238 million.
Which sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot, but it was the second lowest estimate since monitoring began.
It's a massive wake-up call. It proves that a species can be evolutionarily designed to reproduce millions of larvae, it can be highly resilient, and yet it can still be brought to the absolute brink if we destroy the architecture of its home.
Ecosystems are incredibly fragile.
Which brings us to the final and, frankly, the most uncomfortable part of this deep dive.
The moral boundary.
Yes. We've talked about how our appetite impacts the ecosystem and other species, but what about the animal itself? The crab, the lobster. It feels to me like they exist at the very bottom of our empathy ladder.
The empathy ladder is a great way to freeze it.
Think about it. We would never, ever accept a restaurant keeping a live cow or a pig in a brightly lit glass box in the dining room and then watching a chef drop it alive into a vat of boiling water while customers ate breadsticks.
There would be riots.
There would be absolute riots. But we do exactly that to lobsters every single day, and we consider it high-class dining. Are we basically deciding our ethics based entirely on cuteness?
That is the profound philosophical tension of this entire industry.
Right.
Human beings are incredibly visually biased. We naturally extend our moral concern, our empathy, to animals that look like us or act like us.
Mammals.
Mammals with faces, forward-facing eyes, animals that breathe air, and crucially, animals that vocalize pain.
Right, if a dog yelps, we feel it in our chest.
Exactly. But crabs and lobsters don't have mammalian faces. They have compound eyes on stalks. They have antennae.
They look alien.
They are invertebrates. They are alien-looking. And they do not have vocal cords. They literally cannot scream. For a very long time, the scientific and culinary consensus was convenient. They have simple nervous systems. They only exhibit reflex actions. They don't feel pain, so it doesn't matter how we treat them.
But the sources we review suggest that the science on that is shifting dramatically, isn't it?
It is shifting, and it is causing a massive reevaluation. The debate is over sentience.
Sentience, okay.
Now, a lobster does not process pain exactly the way a human or a dog does.
Yeah.
Their neurology is completely different.
Mm.
But recent behavioral and physiological studies show strong evidence regarding invertebrate sentience.
What kind of evidence?
They possess nociceptors, sensory receptors that detect tissue damage. But beyond just reflexes, they exhibit complex avoidance behavior. They learn to avoid negative stimuli.
Wow.
They show physiological stress responses, like spiking adrenaline-like hormones when they're harmed.
They act like they're suffering.
They exhibit behaviors that, in any vertebrate, we would immediately classify as a capacity for suffering. This research was so compelling that recently, the UK government officially amended its animal welfare laws to legally recognize decapod crustaceans, crabs, lobsters, shrimp, as sentient beings capable of feeling pain.
Which fundamentally changes the moral math of the kitchen.
It really does.
If they are sentient, then the traditional way we cook them, dropping a living creature into a pot of rapidly boiling water, is morally horrifying.
It forces a massive reckoning. If they can suffer, then live boiling is a huge ethical dilemma. But it's not just the cooking. It's the entire supply chain.
The transport.
Keeping them in crowded, brightly lit glass tanks with their claws rubber banded shut so they don't mutilate each other out of stress. Packing them in styrofoam boxes on ice for 48 hours for international air travel. Storing them in massive pounds for months. All of it becomes highly questionable.
It really challenges us to ask if our desire for the ultimate freshness justifies causing prolonged distress to a living creature. I mean, we literally crack open their armor to eat them, but we completely ignore their vulnerability when they are alive.
Because treating them as unfeeling robotic objects, treating them as seafood rather than wild animals, makes it psychologically easier to consume them. Emotional distance dictates animal welfare.
Wow. So we have traced the entire arc today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We've seen how these animals live in the dark, cold depths. We've seen how we catch them, how we've turned them into both regional communal rituals and global symbols of luxury.
Yep.
We've seen the incredible damage our appetite causes to the oceans and the uncomfortable questions it raises about our own morality. Ultimately, as we pull back and look at the big picture, what do the crab and the lobster reveal about us? What do they symbolize in the human story?
I think they reveal the sheer transformative power of human civilization. Civilization doesn't just eat nature to survive. It translates living ecosystems into repeatable experiences, into brands, and into social hierarchies.
How so?
Look at the contrasting cultural symbolism of the two animals we studied today.
The crab represents survival and belonging.
Yes, the crab symbolizes tenacity, sideways strategy, and local identity. It is the Chesapeake waterman out on the boat at dawn. It is the messy, communal table covered in newspaper, where families gather to work for their food together. It represents humanity's intimate, physical, working relationship with the muddy edge of the coast.
And the lobster.
The lobster represents spectacle. It represents vanity and the total commodification of nature.
Because it's all about status.
Exactly. It represents the human desire to possess something rare and logistically difficult, to perform our status and wealth for others on a white tablecloth. It is the ultimate story of human engineering, transitioning a wild cold water scavenger into a polished object of pure luxury.
So if seafood begins as a shared wild commons, it's just animals living their lives in the ocean and ends up as a tightly controlled, branded, expensive commodity, what is the takeaway for the listener? Have we essentially forgotten that the ocean isn't just an infinite pantry that we can raid whenever we want?
I think collectively we have. We often mistake our ability to extract for a right to extract. We mistake stewardship for ownership.
Right.
Yes, fisheries management quotas, size limits, protecting females, all of that is absolutely necessary to prevent total collapse. But management can easily morph into a sense of entitlement. We start to believe the ocean is a factory designed to produce our dinner on demand.
We treat it like an assembly line.
Exactly. Humans have a profound habit of turning the living, breathing world into meaning and money. The moral challenge for all of us isn't necessarily whether we take from the sea. We are biological organisms. We are part of the global food web, too.
Of course.
The challenge is whether we can take while remaining accountable. Accountable to the fact that the sea is alive, that it is fragile, that it is finite, and most importantly, that it is not ours alone.
That's incredibly well said. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to look back at the staggering journey we just went on together today.
It was a long journey.
We started deep in the Paleozoic era, tracking ancient armored survivors navigating the pitch-black ocean floor. We watched them fold their bodies into impenetrable shields and grow massive, crushing claws to survive an ocean full of monsters.
We watched them pull their stomachs out of their own mouth.
Yes, the traumatizing molt. And we saw them get pulled from tide pools by early humans and eventually swept up into a multi-billion-dollar global supply chain of wire traps, roaring diesel engines, commercial airplanes, and highly engineered live holding tanks.
The scale is wild.
We sat at newspaper-covered tables smashing crab shells with mallets, and we sat at white tablecloths eating butter-poached lobster, all while navigating the incredibly complex ethical minefields of endangered right whales, migrant labor in picking houses, and the newfound science of invertebrate bane.
It truly is a staggering amount of history, biology, and human ambition contained inside a single show.
It really is. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, lingering idea to chew on long after this deep dive ends. Think about the ultimate irony of their shells. Biologically, crabs and lobsters evolved their exoskeletons, their heavy armor, to protect themselves from predators. It was a masterpiece of evolutionary survival, bought with the terrifying vulnerability of the molt. But as humans, we figured out how to bypass that armor. We hunt them, we trap them, and we crack open their shells to consume them.
Right.
But we don't just leave them exposed. We build a completely new kind of armor around them.
The armor of the market.
Exactly. We surround them with elaborate global supply chains, luxury branding, exclusive restaurant settings, and ambiguous market price menus. Perhaps all of that human-made armor isn't meant to protect the animal at all. Perhaps that armor is designed to protect us.
Wow.
To shield us from the uncomfortable truth of what we are actually taking from the sea and what it really costs to put it on our plate. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored journey. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the label, and remember to question the stories behind the food on your plate.